Welcome to Cartooning Lesson 1. Once again, I'm William Sorrentino, and this is my Flip Your Classroom project for using integrated software across the curriculum. And once again, we are talking about the basics of cartooning. So I'm going to write cartoon up here, and this is lesson 1. Okay, so the basics of cartooning. Alright, we talked a little bit about what cartoons are used for and where you're going to find cartoons, but now we're going to talk about creating our own cartoon. Alright, first thing you have to do is you have to think. Before you even put your pencil onto the paper, you have to think, what is the purpose of my cartoon? Why am I creating a cartoon? Am I attempting to inform somebody of something? Or am I attempting to entertain somebody? What is the reason? Now, for our purposes for this demonstration, we're going to draw an example of a figure. Okay, a figure on a backdrop, and I'm gonna draw a zombie figure because zombies are very topical, and I like to draw them. So the purpose of our production here is simply to educate and for an example. So when you're discussing with yourself, when you're thinking about your purpose, I want you to think about the 4 W's, okay? The 4 W's. That's the what, the where, the who, and the when. And in our particular case, our what is going to be a character, our who is going to be a cartoon zombie, and we'll deal with the where and the when at some other time. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk to you about here in Lesson 1, first thing I want to talk to you about is line. Okay, line. This is your first basic, okay? So we're going to call this basic number 1, and basic number 1 is line. So what is a line? Okay, I mean, by definition, a line is a distance between 2 points. But in the world of cartooning and drawing, a line provides definition and division, which is most important, because if you're working on a piece of paper, which many of you should have according to the material list, if you're working on a piece of paper, a line basically determines what is over here and what is over here. Of course, if your line's going this way, then it's what is over here and what is over there. So basically, a line is the first part of form. Okay, I'm going to write form up here, and I'll put line back up here. Okay, so in our case, a line is going to describe the form of the character that we're cartooning, or whatever it is. I mean, in cartooning, you can cartoon a building just as easily as you can cartoon a person, but either case, you're going to need line, and your line is going to create your form. In our case, we're going to use a series of frames to give our character basic definition. Now, when I say a frame, I mean just a series of lines here, but the idea behind it is that drawing a freehand anything is sometimes pretty difficult, especially when you're beginning. So you create a frame, and the frame will give the basic outline and definition of your character. Now again, as I said, we're going to draw a cartoon zombie, but I won't actually begin to show you how to use this frame until we've discussed a few more things. But basically the frame, it gives you a basic skeleton of what you're attempting to draw. In this case, we're drawing a humanoid figure. So we have a head, we have shoulders, we have a body, we have a pelvic area, and we have legs. And every human character has those things. So when we draw our frame out of lines, it's kind of being used as a reference point. The next thing I want to talk to you about is shape. Okay, shape. Down here. Alright, shape is basically the way your line is going to look. As you can see, I already went ahead and made an area for a head, so in this particular case, we're using this circle shape. Really, the trick to drawing anything, is that anything is a series of shapes. Whether you're drawing something very realistic, like a building or a flower or a Rottweiler, it's all going to come down to shapes. And in our case, we're using a circle shape, we're going to use a triangle shape, we're going to use an inverted triangle shape, we're going to use a couple of rectangles, and if you've noticed, I'm just creating a series of lines, and the line is creating a form. And as I mentioned before, this is our frame. Some people call it a skeletal frame because it is in essence, the skeleton of what we will be creating here in terms of design. So that's about all I wanted to say for form, line, and shape. I do want to tell you that the whole idea behind cartooning is to simplify something. Okay, you're taking an idea or you're taking an object and you're simplifying it into its elements. But no matter how far you simplify it, it has to be recognizable. Okay, so once again we were talking about form, line, and shape, and we have our skeletal figure, which is made out of lines, which are forming which is creating a form, and ultimately is going to give us our shape. The one thing I want to point out that cartooning uses the idea of simple is more. Okay, the less detail, the better, but the details that you have are going to be very, very important. So we're going to look at proportion and perspective next. Sorry, my notes are off screen. We're going to look at proportion and perspective next, which are both very, very important elements of drawing. And what I'd like to tell you at the end of almost every lesson is that the most important thing you can do is practice. Okay, so now you have an idea of how to formulate the purpose behind your drawing, that is what you're going to draw, the who, the what, not necessarily the where and when yet, but it's something you should be thinking about. So you know how to formulate your purpose. Now you're familiar with drawing a series of lines that will create your form, or in this case, a frame. Our form is our frame. It's our skeletal frame of what we're drawing. So when we come back to lesson 2, we're going to talk about other things, but in the meantime, get out your pencil and your paper and come up with a series of frames. And it doesn't have to be people. You can frame anything you want. The key is to think about what the object is that you want to frame and then draw an appropriate frame. I'll give you another example. Let's say that your goal was to sketch a building. Okay, so if you're going to sketch a building, you're going to need line. And with your line, think, what does a building look like? Okay, it's a series of lines. Now, granted, this isn't a highly detailed, nice building yet, but it's a frame of a building. I mean, you could even say to yourself, well, windows belong in a building, so I'll draw a frame for where I want to put the windows. And when we talk about perspective, we'll talk about 3 dimensions, but if we're going to say, well, I want my building to pop out a little bit, I'm going to give it another series of lines. But in the meantime, I just want you to concentrate on practicing making frames and using line to create shape. And then I'll see you again for lesson 2.